All right, guys. So I'm streaming a little bit in the lounge today. It's not technically a classroom because I'm not going over any principles. I'm just doing all of the assignments of this week. And if you have any questions, anyone who's in the chat, feel free to ask him in either the chat, and if Rob could support me in just calling out the questions, or if you have them and just want to ask him through microphone, be my guest. We can just chat and hang out. It doesn't have to be too formal. When it comes to noodles, Ellie, yes. Except for Ike, yes. Awesome, thanks, man. That would be awesome. So right now I'm just doing day one, which is the mannequinization of the reference. So if you guys have any questions about that, it should be pretty straightforward. Like the idea for this assignment basically is to have you or to teach you to structuralize your reference and then be able to recall it in a different perspective. Just really before doing any type of manipulation to the shapes, which I talk about a lot, it's pretty crucial that you first understand just the basic structuralization that you need to apply to any of your subjects, just to better understand them. By the way, feel free to talk, guys, if no one has any questions. Otherwise, it's going to be a lonely effort. Yeah. Oh, no problem. Go ahead. Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. Yes. Right. 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 So I would argue that it's actually really good then for you to keep trying with traditional media, whether it's fine liner, or pencil, or just anything. The reason why traditional, I'm such an advocate for traditional, especially in this problem solving phase, which is day one and day two of the assignments. The problem solving phase is specifically made to help you become more efficient when it comes to drawing and designing. And so the the risk you will run into when doing it digitally is that you have that luxury of undo, right? And so you can automatically make things look cleaner without them actually being clean. And so learning how to do this traditionally helps you premeditate about everything you're putting down on paper, and it should enforce your structural thinking. Of course, if you're new to this, then it's very hard to problem solve everything at the same time. So it's very hard to think, okay, what perspective am I using? What simple shapes am I using? How do I represent this simple shape? Which is something you'll have to gradually get better at, but it's definitely a good idea to, like I'm doing right here, is to use a fine liner and to try to do these assignments traditionally. Now, for the day three assignments, because those are usually more design and thing, they need a bit more ideation. And so that requires a little bit more, I would say, playing around. And so it doesn't really matter that you then go traditional or you do it digitally. That's more of a fun exercise, or at least it should be, to come up with cool designs and kind of do your own thing, kind of forget the rules to a certain extent, because you've been learning the rules in these 2 days, and then you can try and break them, play with the proportions and stuff like that. But yeah, in the beginning, even if you're a beginner, I always advocate for traditional drawing, and that's why I'm also doing it right now, because I could have easily streamed this digitally. But I feel like you have more control over what you're doing when you're doing things traditionally. Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Like anything, like if you keep doing it traditionally, it will only help you with just your problem solving abilities, and that's the main thing that you should be concerned with. It's the same thing that Peter Hahn also advocates when it with the dynamic sketching. He does everything in fineliner as well. He does it a little less structural than I approach it. He just goes with the simple shapes, but that's fine too. It's all about just premeditating what you put on paper, because there's a big difference. It's the same thing with the painting assignments. There's a big difference between copying what you see and understanding what you see and translating that onto the paper. And that's what I'm trying to do in this program. I'm trying to help people build an understanding of what they're seeing. And it doesn't really matter what subject we're drawing, right? Because not all of us in this program want to be like octopus designers or whatever. You might never even draw an octopus for the rest of your life, but that's not the essence of the assignment. The essence is to build an understanding, and to everything you look at, be able to mannequinize it, understand its shapes, and then turn it in perspective, because that will make you an effective designer. Yep. 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 Yes, it actually should be pretty easy. The only thing, still, in my opinion, the only thing that you need to learn in digital is learn the software. That's all you need. And once you understand the software and where everything goes, how you import your brushes, kind of find your way around what you like, what you don't like in the software, then you're on the same playing ground, whether it's traditional or digital. It's again, you're fully reliant on your skills. That's always what you're reliant on, especially when you want to do drawing, like in the sense that I'm talking about. There's, of course, things like photo bashing, and 3D. It's just you can't do that on a piece of paper. You can do clay and whatever, but photo bashing is like that's a purely digital skill. But that only you only do that when you have a good understanding of the fundamentals. Otherwise, photo bashing makes no sense. Yes. Yep. Well, there's arguments for just learning digital, and there's arguments for starting traditional. Again, I'm a very traditionalist. I have a very traditionalist mindset, so I would always say learning traditional is good. The main benefit I see for digital is that it's the cost, right? It doesn't cost that much to learn painting traditionally, which drawing never costs much. You just need a pencil and a piece of paper. Whereas painting, it kind of all depends, right? It still can be very cheap. Like I just bought this very cheap set of watercolors and just some water brush pens, and you can already start painting. Now, of course, there are different effects. Like if you want to do acrylics or oils that have a bit more of that finished effect, then you need more expensive boards or watercolor papers to do that. So the cost will go up dramatically. However, I do think there's a very big benefit to learning how to paint traditional, and the main reason for it is learning to mix colors, because learning to mix your own colors gives you a much better understanding of how to make color coherencies, and avoid having muddy colors, which a lot of beginners run into that problem. So again, one can complement the other, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's 100% necessary to start painting traditionally. Hello. Yes. Yes. Okay. Uh, um. Well, it's hard for me to tell you what schedule you need to keep to, because it usually depends on how you feel, what you feel is comfortable, um, and it kind of also depends on your rhythm. What I mean by that is, if you do these assignments and you feel like they're really hard, that means that you need to do a lot of problem solving. If you do need to do a lot of problem solving for these assignments, that means you need to use a lot of mental energy, right? It costs a lot of mental energy, all this thinking, to do these assignments. And so if you do that in the morning, 2 hours, and you're mentally exhausted, and then you need to go into work and do your work, that could be a detriment to your work, right? Um, so yeah. Now you can also make the case for, well, if you come from work, you're already mentally exhausted, and then you still need to do the assignments. Um, yeah, exactly. You can't learn as efficiently, maybe. So it's kind of a thing to find the balance for yourself. What you need to do, you could either do like parts of each assignment, like what I used to do a lot of the times. I would sketch during work, right? So a lot of my training during my lunch break, just 1 hour of training anatomy or doing. I filled that entire hour. I never went out with my colleagues. I was very asocial, and then just did everything during my lunch break. Um, so yeah, uh, now or back then in general. Good question. Yeah. Well, you don't need to do personal work for social media. Let that be the case, or let that be a given. But you do need to do personal work. The reason you need to do personal work is because it will also feed into your professional work. The thing is with personal work is that you can experiment, right? You have that room for experimentation to kind of see what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like. And so this is where you experiment and learn new things that you can apply to your professional work. So I would say always try to do at least once a week some sort of personal work, because otherwise it will eat at you. And like I can testify to this because this year, for instance, I've only done client work because I had such a busy schedule up until now. Like essentially from this week, I haven't done any personal work except for some doodles, but that doesn't really count. Um, and mentally, that does take a toll. So you always want to do some form of personal work, I believe. No, not at all. The less you care, the funny thing is the less you care about social media, the more following you will get. Well, the thing is like because it's that stupid algorithm, right? The more active you are, the more engagement you get, which is true. Um, right, right. Yeah, I know. I get that. The thing is though, like, how long can you keep doing that if what you're uploading isn't really authentic, right? If you're just uploading it for the algorithm. That's the thing. Like you're doing this art career or whatever. You're playing the longevity game. You're trying to do this for as long as possible. So if you're doing something that you really enjoy and that's authentic to you and that really represents what you do, what you love, who you are, then it's a lot easier to keep doing that. And if you look at the most famous artists on Instagram or whatever social media, they are that they are really are like authentic. They do what they love doing, even if we don't sometimes agree with it. Maybe they actually love doing that, and that's why where you see a lot of people they're trying to mimic what other successful artists do, but then they quickly give up or they get burned out because it's not their authentic self. They're just trying to mimic someone else. So I think it's always better to just find something that you're really passionate about and try to pursue that. And then the following will follow, as they say. That will just come later. You're welcome. Painting traditionally, the Alla Prima book from Richard Smith is one of those holy bibles of painting, I would say. Other than that, when it comes to learning painting traditionally, like I can only attest to the Watts Atelier. Like, and this is, this is speaking against my own platform, but uh, like ArtWatt is a complementary when it comes to training. And if you really want to learn, like deeply want to learn painting traditionally, I think ArtWatt is Watts Atelier is one of the best resources out there, because Jeffrey Watts, the way he can articulate things when it comes to painting and learning how to paint is, I feel like there's no one else out there currently doing that. All right, you're welcome. Yep, yep. Yeah, no, it's exactly like it's a really clear question. It's a good question as well, because a lot of people tend to, especially beginners, tend to fall into this trap that they tailor their portfolio to a specific studio they want to work at. Now, I am treading into somewhat dangerous territory because, to some degree, you do need to tailor your portfolio a little bit, but I would say only a little bit. So, what I mean by that, like, if you want to work on the new God of War or on Uncharted or The Last of Us, then don't make cartoons, right? That's a given, right? Then do realistic work, or at least realistically rendered with cool lighting and stuff like that. But other than that, don't really tailor it to their specific concept art. And one of the main examples that I always give, which is actually, it almost counters what I just said, is Loish from, famous on Instagram, who does cartoony girls. She did concept art for Guerrilla Games on Horizon Zero Dawn. Right? Super realistic game, right? But she does very cartoony work. So why did they hire her for, to have for the modelers? Not really. They hired her for her ideas. So if your ideas are good, you'll you'll get into the industry a lot quicker. Like, because good ideas are very scarce. Cool, like cool illustrations and stuff like that, they are also needed, but there are a lot of people doing that. Secondly, if you are still, if you still want to do cool illustration work and cool designs, that then you still don't need to tailor your style towards a company style. Like, everyone for a long time was trying to do the Blizzard style, but then and it's the same with the anime or the manga style. Like, it all becomes like almost everything looks the same and generic, and you get that same face syndrome, and everyone's trying to do the same thing, and so there's not a really artistic voice. Um, and if you look at two other famous and really good artists, Jesper Esching, one of my favorite artists, and then Max Grecke, also a really famous artist on Instagram, they both worked on Hearthstone from Blizzard, right? Same project, but their styles are completely different. Like, they couldn't be further apart, but they still worked on the same project. Now, is that because they tailored their work towards the company? No, it's just because they're really good at what they do. And Blizzard recognizes that, and then they hire those people. You see? So there's a big difference between tailoring yourself towards an employer, or just being really passionate about a certain thing and becoming really good at that. That will make you a lot more employable than actually tailoring yourself to other companies. Good question. Good question. Um, Good question. Loaded answer. There's it's a multiple. It's multiple factors. So on the one hand, yes, you do need feedback from professionals just to not only make your design skills sharpener, like uh, Rob can attest to this. Like, you need someone to look over your work and say, "Hey, you can push this in this direction," even if you understand the basics. It still requires a certain eye to see different things. And usually that comes from a lot of mileage. So your design skills definitely get better through just doing the work repeatedly and repeatedly and seeing what works and what doesn't, and also just looking at other artists that you really admire and kind of comparing your work, right? Because that's also what we do constantly. We compare ourselves with other artists, we see what's really cool, and it just works in their style, and we're not trying to copy that, but we are trying to take things. That's how you cultivate a style, by the way. A unique style is just an accumulation of the people you stole from, so to speak. It's just that if you steal from one artist, it plagiarism. If you steal from 100 artists, you can create something original, right? It's a famous quote from, I think it's Sting, but I'm not sure. Um, so it's always it's a push and pull. You need feedback from other artists, but you also need to just go through the mileage. And there are definitely things that you can do to improve your design skills. And one of those things is it's the thing that I like really give a lot in the art wad assignments, is that starting with the basics and trying to make the basics look interesting. It's one of the famous things. It's one of the things that always I kept in the back of my mind, and I remember from a workshop that I did with the authors from the book Sketching the Basics, a book that I really recommend a lot of the times. They're product designers, so they're not concept artists, but they have given lectures in Guerrilla Games and other companies, Ubisoft, I think. And I did one of their workshops, and I asked them the exact same question, like, how can we improve our design sense? And she told me, like, have you ever tried to make a cylinder look interesting? And I was like, no, of course not. And then she told me, like, how can you expect to make anything else look cool if you can't even do that? Which is a really good answer, because if you cannot make simple object look interesting, things like props or even just simple, spheres, or just one tentacle maybe, right? If you cannot do that, how do you expect to make cool creatures or cool vehicles or cool anything, right? You to train your design skills, try to learn it on simple objects. Yeah. Hey, to quote Todd McFarlane, like his only secret was make it look cooler. So in this structure phase, guys, just only think about the simple shapes and don't worry about shape manipulation. Like I said, that comes later. That's actually a day 2 assignment where we can really think about, okay, how are these contours being manipulated? But right now, just think about volumes and structure. Oh, nice. I love bouldering. Yeah. Well, if you're very new to the program or drawing in general, it definitely couldn't hurt, right? So yes, then the warm ups you can definitely do them. Now I did specifically make those warm ups just to accompany certain assignment weeks, so I didn't actually make them just as a standalone thing. Uh, but I would say like if there's anything that you could do that you want to do on a daily basis, I would say it's the day one assignments of any of the drawing assignment weeks, right? So just those day one assignments, or there'll be part one in the future, because those are usually based on structure, simple form, shape manipulation, all those things, which is better than only training your gesture and keeping a steady hand. Now you can do this sporadically just to get a better feel for drawing from the shoulder, training your wrist to be more stable, but it's not something that should be, or at least in my opinion, should be trained daily. Like the things that you should train daily is trying to understand form, shapes, problem solving, volume, spatial awareness. These are things that are crucial because those are the things that you want to be able to translate into your designs. Yep. Definitely. Like that's exactly what I do in this program. I actually force you to visualize certain objects, turn them in 3D, um, and then play around with its proportions, study its anatomy, or study its packaging, which gives you better information of what you're actually drawing. That's like I follow the Kim Young Ji method very carefully, actually, because it truly makes you good at design. Um, and you can do this for everyday objects, right? I just pick a handful that I consider useful and are very common in the industry, but you can. And the beauty about this is it's principles. So I'm teaching you principles. I'm not teaching you. It's like give a man a fish versus teaching him how to fish. I'm not giving you a fish. In this case, I am giving you a squid or an octopus. But the principle is I'm trying to teach you how to learn things, understand things, and whether this is now an octopus, and later in another assignment you need to do a vehicle or you need to do an airplane, you will start to understand those principles and it will become easier to apply them to those objects. Let's do one more. Right, right. Yeah. Well, your brain will tell you while you're well when you're overloading. Yeah. Well, the principle itself, right? You can study if you I think I got that phrase from Anthony Jones where he said, like, if you ask anyone this question when it came to volume, is if you draw 100 pumpkins, which one will look best, right? The first one or the 100th one that you drew? And everyone knows that answer. However, no one seems to apply it in real life when it comes to drawing. Everyone wants to get good super quick. But you just need to go through that mileage. That's a fact. All right, and then for the day 2 assignment, guys, quickly intersecting. The thing that I want you to learn, I saw some day 2 assignments already. They were looking good. However, it's very similar to what I explained in the Dragon classroom. I still want you to think about these simple structures. However, I now want you to think about more of the shape manipulation that is happening. So you need to look really closely at your reference and see the shape manipulation that is happening. So, for instance, let's just take this guy that I have right here. Let me pull up his reference. So instead of just having a cylinder, what's the manipulated version of that cylinder in the reference that I'm seeing? And so if you don't know about shape manipulation, I highly recommend that you watch the classroom one that I have on fish and also the dragon classroom that I have on shape manipulation. And so when I look at that reference, basically what I'm seeing is that this cylinder is being inflated at the ends and then being pinched together in the middle. That's roughly how I look at it. So when I go to redraw it, what I do is I draw more of an inflated cylinder like this, and then it gets pinched in the middle, and then it gets inflated again on the other end. Right. And then I'm thinking about, okay, then how does that wedge into that cylinder that I have here, which I already have tapered a little bit. But when I look at the reference, it feels a little bit more organic. And not only does it feel more organic, the do I have another color? Let me just quickly. Oh, did it? No. I'll just reconnect it. I'm recording everything here anyway, guys. So, am I back? All right. Can you see me? Okay. So what I was saying is this whatever that is nozzle. Let's call it as nozzle. So I drew it in the day 1 assignment. I drew it as a simple tapered cylinder that's a little bit bent, right? So it's already a manipulated shape. However, now we're going to manipulate the contour as well. And if we think about the contour of this shape, it's just a basic circle, right? However, when I look at my reference, and let me quickly share it with you guys. Copy. No. Copy and paste. All right. So when I'm looking at this reference, what I see in terms of this cross section, I'm not seeing that cross section. What I'm actually seeing is a little bit more of a wider top and then a little bit more narrow at the bottom. And so when I go to draw that shape, I'm also going to apply that cross section to make it feel a little bit more organic. So we have that cylinder here, and then we have that wider base. It sits more like this, and then it also bends because it's still that bent cylinder. And I'm still going to draw through this form just to make a point. And we have that manipulated cross section like this that wedges in here right? And so that's what I want you guys to do as well, is still think about the structuralization and mannequinization, but just with more manipulated shapes, because this will make you a really effective designer, especially when you go into, you know, just designing creatures or whatever. You don't always need to understand all of the anatomy, especially with things like this, like mollusks or, you know, invertebrates. It's very hard to study their anatomy, um, because it's so different, and it's almost impossible for us to remember everything. Even think of animal anatomy. We almost compare all animal anatomy to human anatomy because it's so similar, and it's very hard unless you're a specialist to really understand all the nuances of all the anatomy of each animal. It's basically impossible unless your name is Kim Young Ji, maybe. But I think even he does it the way I do it. He thinks about those manipulated structures of which that animal consists, which makes it a lot easier for him to turn everything in space, because he's basically just wedging together shapes and volumes and not thinking about all the underlying anatomy. He does know a lot of anatomy, but I don't think he's applying all of it all of the time. And so same for his body. Again, it's not a circle like it is here. It's more of that similar shape that's a bit more wide at the top and a little bit more narrow at the bottom. So we're again using that manipulation. And the cool thing about this one, by the way, is that it doesn't repeat itself all the way through. It also flattens out. So it goes from wide at the top to narrow at the bottom to, you know, equally a bit more wider and narrow to, you know, widening out pretty significantly to, you know, flattening out, just like this. And that combined, you know, creates that unique body shape for that squid. And don't be afraid to, again, draw through your shape. Yes? Yeah. Good question. So you mainly want to know how I got from hobbyist to professional, right? Well, just thing is, like, it depends on what you want to call a professional. Because technically, you're a professional if you get paid for what you do. So, if you do a commission sometimes, then you're a professional. If you can live from it, that's a completely different story. Now, of course, you can in this day and age you can live from social media, right? If you're well known enough, especially in the YouTube area, you don't even have to be that good of an artist to actually make a good living. But are you then actually a professional artist, or are you a professional YouTuber, right? That's the question I always ask. Um, if I think it's still like the professional artist term is still, if you either teach it, or you you're like a guy who sells his paintings, or, and even if that is on social media, if you like, if your social is primarily, like, is if it consists of a fan base that wants to buy your art. Think of people like Elisa, which is a modern a version of that. So she has a huge Instagram following, and she probably makes her living doing that, doing those commissions. So yes, she's a full-on professional artist. Um, so you can definitely make a living off of that. I don't know if you need to strive for that. I think it usually more happens because, again, people like Elisa, they have found their own voice. They're unique in what they do, and they just started, monetizing that. But she worked at, I think, DreamWorks, if I'm not mistaken, or Pixar for a long time. Um, so I wouldn't necessarily tailor my skills toward anything specific. And the way that I went about it, it was just like, if I want to do professional art, I was already always drawn to concept art. So I was like, yeah, I need to do concept art, so I need to get into the concept art industry, which is usually I need to contact studios and do work for them. And that's also what I did. Um, the way that I did it, it's hard to answer, I'd say. I just did a lot of training, like similar to what I give in the Art One program. A lot of analytical things. I applied a lot of what I learned from doing CrossFit training and applied that to my art, and that seemed to pay off. But I took the plunge in 2017 when I got I think, somewhat of a green light from guys like Adam Duff and Tyler Edlin that supported me and like, yeah, dude, you should try and do this professionally because you're ready. So I kind of felt ready to do it. However, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a professional because no one knew who I was, right? So no one was actually hiring me. So that also meant that even though I was self-employed, I still took up a job at my buddy's company to go window cleaning for a year and a half, I think, when I was finding client work. And basically, how I went about it, I did work for everyone. I was what you call an art prostitute. Everyone that wanted to pay me for doing something, I did it. I didn't care. I just wanted to build up that professional skill, I'd say. Like I say a lot of times here in the Discord as well, the only way to become a professional is doing professional work. So having people pay you to do work and doing that repeatedly. And then, once I did that, I got into small companies, did a lot of things that, are very meaningless jobs, but they were still paying, and they were still art jobs. And then I slowly worked my way up, got some contact with an advertisement company called Media Monks, which, I probably owe my career to them because the guy that I worked with, Tony Dietstein, he was a big fan of me. He gave me more and more work. I met every deadline, so I think that's how we sent my name around in the industry, and that got me into the gaming industry, I guess. And then people started to contact me, and I think the ball just started rolling from there. But again, it's very organic, and you cannot pinpoint like this is how you're going to be a professional. You kind of have to roll into it, and you definitely just have to start it. I think that's the most important thing. Like a lot of here, even some of my students in the Discord, or in the program, they're probably good enough to be professionals, but they sometimes lack the confidence to just start doing professional work. which is mainly the what you need to do. Just start becoming a professional. That's the important thing. Um, yeah, well, yeah, it's all of those things. It's being consistent. Being consistent is actually probably the main thing that I would recommend anyone do, um, or be, because that is what actually sticks with a lot of um, art directors and people hiring. They look for people that are consistent and passionate about what they do, and those are the people they keep following. ArtStation is, of course, one of the best platforms right now to be an artist because I can tell you that every major company is on ArtStation, and not just physically, as in they're posting jobs or anything. Like literally, a lot of art directors just browse ArtStation and they follow artists and they even watch their blog posts. So be careful of what you put on your blog posts on ArtStation, by the way. Keep everything you do on ArtStation professional because a lot of the people that are there are looking through that. And it used to be the same for conceptart.org, which, kind of died. Um, so yeah, just keeping a professional, I think, appearance, right? If you want to have your own personal thing or you want to rant about politicals, do it on like a pseudonym somewhere else on a platform that's not artistically related. Keep your things professional, keep it consistent, and just show people that you love what you do. I think that's the primary thing. Industry, right? Yes, I'm just creating. I need render monkeys. So if everyone feels like it's his calling to be my render monkey, reach out to artwad.com, info@artwad.com, because someday I will need render monkeys. Yep. You can never draw too much. Who's talking? Liana? Okay. Hi. So yeah, you can never draw too much. There's two things, by the way, two things about tendonitis that I want to demystify. One is that yes, you can really get it. Two, it's very unlikely that you will get it. However, especially when you're young, unless you're like, I don't know, drawing in a position uh, like the guy from the Disney from the Notre Dame, like that guy, like just in a weird ass position, then yeah, everything will get screwed up. But if you keep, yourself pretty, it's just if you stand up a little bit, you go for a walk sometimes, and then you sit up straight, then getting tendonitis, even in your wrists, should be very unlikely, and have unless you have some predisposition to get it genetically. Um, However, like a lot of people do get it primarily sometimes because it's a mental thing. So even Jeffrey Watts talks about this. A lot of his students sometimes get tendonitis because actually what they're doing, they don't enjoy what they're doing. And if you do enough, so um, I have talked about this before. If you look at any professional athlete, or if you watch anyone professional on TV, and they ask them how they feel before a game, they always say the same thing. They're excited, right? Usually they're nervous as hell, but they trick their brain into thinking they're excited. And this really helps, okay? Because a lot of the times drawing isn't always fun. That's just a fact, right? Especially when you need to learn. Soner can attest to this. Drawing is not always fun, but it's definitely we need to go through it. But however, if you find it dreadful every day to do your studies, even these art one assignments, and you really think, "Oh, this is I need to do this again. I need to do even if I want to get better, I need to do this again." Then your brain will go into survival mode, and your brain is very powerful. So what it does, it kind of tricks you into having these body aches, and it tells you like you don't need to draw again because we start to realize that every time you start to draw you feel bad, right? And so it kind of creates a pseudo tendonitis or anything else. Carpal tunnel, for instance, is another one. um, So it's very much a mental thing as it is a physical thing. So you should always try to be excited when you go to draw, or at least be excited about that you're going to learn new stuff, even though if it is mentally exhausting. There's definitely a mental aspect to it. No, it's good. Yes, yes. Oh, cool. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, that's the thing. Especially if you do handstands and stuff like that, the unnatural position of your hands can cause some form of stress on your wrists. It's not necessarily tendonitis, but it does cause a lot of stress. And I think the only way to kind of mitigate it is to do a lot of stretching, and not only on your wrist but on your entire body. So what I do, like I train 4 times a week with CrossFit, but I also do yoga two times a week with my wife. Just because you need that full body stretch and you need to keep everything in place. Whereas if you because if you do physical exercise like you even handstands and gymnastics, that's stress, right? We induce stress onto our bodies. This is starting to become a health channel, but you induce stress onto your body, which it does need to get countered. So it needs to get countered by good nutrition, good sleep, and also stretching. Yes. Yeah. Right now I have this at, yeah, about a 45-degree angle, just because the camera here can shoot things better, and then the light isn't directly onto it. But usually, sorry. Um, well, thinking about it, yeah, it actually probably does. I don't really draw in this way a lot of the times. Well, usually I draw on my iPad, which is also in a 45-degree angle, by the way. And I just recently bought this desk converter to also draw standing up, because I got a lot of inflammation on my tailbone because my chair is too hard. I need to get a softer chair and probably a better one as well, because this is like one of those stupid gaming chairs. And like, especially with these grinding days working for Sony, I was just sitting down 12 hours a day, which is really unhealthy. Uh, but it's yeah, exactly. It needs it. It does need it. Like, it literally needs it. Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. Like even though standing for too long isn't that good as well, at least sometimes it incentivizes you to also just walk around a little bit and not just keep sitting. So yeah, I agree. Probably is. All good things in moderation. Ooh, fancy. Excuse us for being insignificant, Ted. I wish that was true. Yes. Uh, yeah. Yeah, good question. Yeah. Well, I think usually it balances itself in meaning that sometimes you need to put extra attention into studying because you run into in your personal project you're running into a problem that you cannot solve or at least not cannot effectively solve, so you need to do more studies, right? And that will require like two-thirds of your time will be divided into doing studies in order to solve the problem that you have in your personal work. But then you might get into like a new like state of enlightenment where you can focus more on your personal work and kind of leave studies on the side a little bit. But I think they always need to complement each other. You can also do like a 50-50 if you wanted to. However, from my experience, I found that I either do a lot of studying and some personal work, or I do a lot of personal work and some studying. And if you even, especially combine with professional work, um, if I have a lot of professional work, for instance, I will do more studying because I'm already doing professional work, which kind of more replaces my personal work than it does my studying. And if I have less professional work, I will do more personal work and even less studying, I'd say, because I've done all of that during my professional work. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Gotta keep him busy. Otherwise, he just starts whinging again. I'm like, just sooner do this, do more of this. Yeah, exactly. Typical IT things, actually. Yeah. Well, again, that's a combination of studying. I think sometimes studies inspire you to do something creative. Also, just looking at other artists. Usually, I talked about this with Adam Duff. I think with Brahm as well. Is there are artists that demotivate you to draw? Like, this guy's just too good. Why do I do this? But then there's other artists that really like. If you see their work, you're like, oh man, I need to draw something now, even if it's similar to what they're doing. And I think those are the things that you need to look for when you kind of feel demotivated to do anything, or you don't really feel inspired. I feel like that's the beauty also of ArtStation, because a lot of people always say like ArtStation is demotivating, but you can definitely go on ArtStation and just look at things that just make you want to draw or paint or whatever. Um, and I think that's sometimes the things that I look, and especially I do it a lot because I have a lot of books from some of my favorite artists like Karl Kapinski, Kim Young Ji, Claire Wendling, and if I feel like there's nothing I can do or want to do, I just go through their books, and it's always like, oh yeah, I want to draw something like this. Welcome. Yeah. Let me tell you a little secret. Sometimes I charge my clients full day prices, but I only work half a day. However, however, I'm actually charging two clients full day rates and doing them in the same day. The reason I can do that, however, is because I can usually do the work of one day's effort in half a day because I'm efficient at the things I'm specialized in, right? If they ask me to do an environment, it's just going to take me 2 days instead of one day. So I'm losing money. Um, but if you're efficient at what you do, that's the beauty of it. You can do half a day's work, or no, you can do a whole day's work, or even 2 days of work in half a day. Um, yeah, yeah. It's also you cannot expect to be productive for 8 hours as an artist. You're not a 9 to 5 employee, run of the mill, just unboxing things, right? You're being creative, and that takes a very large mental toll. So it's not always, and sometimes I do 12-hour days, right? Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I do way longer days than normal. But I just find that flow state, and it just perpetuate me to keep going, and I don't. Time just flies by, right? It's that typical flow state thing. So, good for me. I'm even more efficient, and I am doing more time. But I've probably in that 12-hour space, I probably did maybe a week's worth of work for my client, which sometimes I don't charge them at all. So they win money, right? It's a push and pull thing. Yeah, that's completely normal. Yeah, yeah. I get that. I get that feeling. So, oh no, we all need to go through that. Yep. 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 It's a good tip. Um, yeah, yeah, that's enough for me. That'll do. I usually don't listen to music when I do concepting, so in the beginning of my day, but I will turn on music when I do cleaning up or just not rendering per se, but cleaning up my drawings or getting in detailing. Then I will put on music. So usually in the afternoon. Yeah, yeah, it really is. Yeah, it might be terror. You also tattoo and talk probably, right, Rob? So it's probably already ingrained in there. Oh, really? Good guy, Rob. All right. There any more questions? I think I covered the shape manipulation, contour manipulation. Anything else you guys wanted to ask for this week's assignments that you want to know? primarily for its organic aspect, because it's the cool thing about tentacles, which I was drawing here, is that, and it's something I go over with the mentorship I'm doing with Sonar, is when we look at something organic, like for instance goat horn or ram horns or whatever, a lot of you tend to just draw the horns like this and consider them as circles, or consider the contour as circles. And so with tentacles, it's the same principle, and it really forces you to think about the contour lines and the cross sections and how they sit in space and how they go through space. And you need to consider how that then looks when you're making these, things wrap around each other and go in circles and twirl. And it's a really good thing to consider how that actually, or it's really good for your spatial awareness. Yeah, well, yeah, but that's like one kind of, like that's the one that I drew here, right? So there's tentacles that they actually, when they swirl around, they they connect. So, for instance, this one will connect here, and then we'll start to see the inside, right? Kind of like hair does. So they have some sort of thickness and then a flat top, so to speak, or a flat bottom. But there are also tentacles that have a cross section that looks more like the one I drew here, where we have a rounded top and then a curved in bottom. And so there, yeah. And then there's things like that you can make more designerly, make more interesting shapes. Like right we have here that it's not just flat like this, but you can really make it go in like this, and then maybe have a little bit of that, and then you can play around with how that acts in space. And that's what makes you a designer, how you can control these contours and manipulate them a little bit and make these interesting shapes. And the thing I want to stress though, yeah, and it's something that I'll talk about in a future video, is that what you're doing here is learning the steps, but then as soon as you start designing, you sort of reverse engineer this. And what I mean by that is, I don't start my designs this way. Like even this is also mannequin based. I don't start my designs that way. The way I start my designs is with a pencil, or in my iPad's case, just a light layer. And I'll just start scribbling, right? And I'll look for shapes that look interesting, so cool gestures and stuff like that, and think about the thickness and the movement, and also the the flow. And then when I have something that looks cool, I will reverse engineer it with the structure that I've been showing, or showing here. And it's that principle that I want to teach you guys, because you actually reverse engineer when you design, because you want to go from that abstract shape, that those shapes that look cool, and then reverse engineer structure into it, because that's what solidifies it, and that's what makes it look presentable, and is what gives modelers the chance to actually build what you're drawing. So you're not only purely thinking abstractly. So yeah, that's something I still wanted to mention.